Alright, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to render out our creatures inside Maya. So before we get started, you need to export all your textures out from Substance Painter. So to do that, you just go to File, Export Textures, and I've messed around with this, so some things are turned off, but by default, everything should be turned on the left here. If you have multiple meshes inside your substance scene, and all of these should be turned on as well. So if you've done everything right, you should just need to change the directory and then export. If not, then just change the template to this and you should be fine. So the only thing we're going to be using out of Substance Painter is our diffuse as well as our roughness, and that's really about it, right? We need to make sure that we have the maps from ZBrush. So the displacement map that we exported from ZBrush, as well as the normal map that we exported from ZBrush as well. So we're going to use the normal map from ZBrush, the displacement map from ZBrush, and the roughness and the albedo from Substance Painter. The reason being is that the normal map and displacement map from ZBrush is much higher in quality and accuracy. And if you have any sort of errors in your baking, which you probably do have some form of errors somewhere, it might be little ones around here, like I have here, then that will show up in your render. So the one in ZBrush shouldn't really have any sort of errors, and should be pretty good. Okay, so I'm in Maya, and I've imported my models. Now the important part here is that we import the model that we imported into Substance Painter. So we need to make sure that our models has all the correct UVs. So we'll go into here and just double check this. You can see this model has all the correct UVs. Everything looks fine. So just double check that you're importing the correct model and it has the right UVs. Now when you import your model, I'm just going to turn this visibility off for now. It's more likely than not that the creature that you're importing is going to be really small, like tiny on the size of the grid. You can see that my creature is quite large. Now we want to make sure that it's sized properly. So how the subsurface scattering works in Arnold is based off like the physical size. So how I like to measure this is just add a sphere or cube or something, and it will appear in the middle like this. And if you grab it and then press W and bring this up in the Y, so I'm lagging a little bit here. So what you're looking for is the translate Y. So that should be about 2 meters. And all I'm doing is just grabbing all of my models. So I have it in a group, but you can just select all the pieces and then just scale it up to fit that sphere. So roughly around that height. And what you want to do as well is just make sure that the creature is on the ground plane like this. Okay, so that should be pretty good and we should be able to get started. Now what I'm going to do is just exit Substance Painter. So hopefully that'll speed up the computer a little bit. And then we'll get started. So let's bring up the Hypershade and I'll show you what we're going to end up doing. So this is the node network for my creature. You can see I've got them all set up for the eyes, the eye bits, I guess, the tusk, and this is this skin shader here. So I'm going to delete this and then we'll start this again. So let's just press delete and let's take a look at our model. Okay, so what I'm going to do is grab this just to make the screen as big as possible. It's going to get rid of some of these menus here. I don't need any of that. Okay, so let's just give this a render and see what it looks like. So I've got a sky dome in here, but it's turned off. Now it should be just more or less nothing. So let's just press the IPR renderer up here. You can see I've got a previous snapshot here. And let's take a look. Let's minimize that. Now if it's taking a bit too long, we can speed up the renderer. I'm going to stop that. And then over here in the toolbar, we have our render settings. Let's go to Arnold renderer. And I'm going to drop down these values to fairly low. So that should speed things up quite a bit. So let's go back to the IPR. Let's see what this looks like. So you can see there's nothing there. There's the alpha. So we need to add a light in. So let's do that now. So the lights that I'm going to be using today is just a sky dome. And I've just taken that from polyhaven.com. Right, so you can just Google Polyhaven and find the HDRI sections and just download one that you think looks good. And then you can use that. So I'm going to delete this from my outliner and we'll just make that again. So let's go up into the menu bar where we have Arnold. Open that up and find lights, and we're going to make a sky dome light. So in our hypershade, we can find our sky dome. I'm going to make this full screen, and I'm going to get rid of some of these menus. So I'm going to get rid of this this list here, because I'm going to press tab to bring everything up. Just makes it so I can see everything on this small screen. Okay, so once you've downloaded your HDRI, all you need to do is press tab in this space here, type in file, and we're looking for this one here, so file texture. So we can grab this node, and then let's pipe this straight away. So we're going to grab the out color and pipe that into the sky dome's in color. And then in the file node, let's go over to the properties, and where it says image name, let's click this and find where you have your where you save that HDRI. Okay, so I've got mine over here. It's just popped up on my second monitor, so I think it's this one. Great, and we don't need to do anything at this point, so we can minimize this window. We should be able to see everything. Now let's give this a quick render using the IPR renderer. Let's take a look. So I'll stop that, press play again. Okay, so it looks like it's brought the textures in still, even though I got rid of it in the viewport of the hypershade. But we can see it sort of lit up and it looks pretty good. So I'm going to turn that off now, and in the hypershade, let's add a new shader. Before we do that, let's just set up the camera so we can have the hypershade on one side, and then we can have the renderer on the other side, so I don't need to sort of bring this menu up and down. So what I'm going to do is let's split the viewport into two. So I can press this button here on the left, and it'll split this into two. Now I have a camera here, so I'm just going to delete that. We'll start this process again. And let's go into our perspective view. And then let's go up here to create cameras, and we want camera and aim. So in the outliner, you'll have a camera group. In that group, you have a camera aim, which is where the camera is pointing, and then the camera itself. So I'm going to click on the camera and just scale that up a bit because it's quite small. And let's move that back as well. So on this viewport here, let's change the view to the camera. So we can go to the viewport menus, go to panels, perspective, and camera 1. So this is what this camera is looking at. So I'm going to change the camera aim to roughly about the middle of the creature. And then let's bring the camera up. And let's bring it back a bit. Something like that. And let's make sure we have our save frames turned on as well. So our render regions, our render resolution gate. Now I have my resolution for this render scene set to 1000 by 1500. And you can put whatever you want in, but you can change that in the render settings. So press the render settings, go back to common, and just scroll down, and you can put in whatever you want. This sort of works for me, but if you're still working out the render, or if you have a pretty slow computer, then you probably want to keep this number pretty low for now anyways. So let's frame this up a bit nicer, but before we do that, let's change the focal length of this camera. So let's go to the attribute editor, and you can see that the focal length is set to 35. And I want to increase that to about 55 to around 85. That's pretty nice for portraits or this sort of full body render. You can bring this out a bit more, and let's frame our creature up a bit nicer. Great, so I think that looks pretty good. Don't forget to save it as well. So we'll save this out just in case. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to have our hypershade up. I'm going to bring this to the left here, and I'm going to bring up my, the IPR renderer, put that to the right, and then put the hypershade to the left here. I'm going to make the IPR renderer a bit smaller, like that. Okay, so let's start off by putting a shader on this creature. So let's press tab, type AI standard, and we're looking for this one here. So with this creature selected, I'm going to right click on the shader and hold and assign material to viewport selection. So we should have this type of creature here. Now the displacement has come through already because I have done this before, but let's just go through this again. So yours will look very different. It will probably just be white and there won't be any details there. So let's go through this again. We want to first test the displacement out to see if that works, and then if that works, we'll move on to the normal map. So let's set up our displacement map. What we're going to do is create a file node. So let's press tab, type file. We're going to grab this one here. And then in the file node, let's search for the displacement. And remember, this is the one that we've exported outside of ZBrush. And it should look something like this. So you're going to have a bunch of files, and it's going to be something like DM1001. So there should be 4 of these depending on how many UDIMs you have. If you have 4, then you have 1001 to 1004. So just pick the first one in the list, press open. And what we need to do is tell Maya that we're using a UDIM setup. So you can go to the UV tiling mode, change that to UDIMs. And Maya should see the other ones in the list. So it should give you the total of tiles. And of course, this is a utility map. So it's not a map that we see or contributes to the final color. or to the color itself. So we need to change the color space to raw. And then we're going to grab the out and put that into the displacement shader slot right here. Now again, mine already has it, so it's not going to change, but yours is going to change a little bit. It's not going to look exactly the same, and that's because there's not enough subdivisions to support that displacement. So what we need to do is minimize this window. Let's select our model, and then over here in the attribute editor, just find where it says Arnold, open that up, scroll down a little bit and find subdivisions. Open that up, and by default should be none. So change that to Cat Clark, and then increase the iterations to the same amount of iterations that you had in ZBrush. In my case, it was about 6 or 7, I can't remember. For now, if you are working on a slower machine, then you can keep this number fairly low, so around 2 or 3, and you should see a difference. It won't be exactly the same as how it looks in ZBrush, but it should be somewhat close. So I've changed it to 6. That means there's going to be quite a lot of polygons to displace during render time. So let's bring that back over, and then I'm going to bring my hypershade back up. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now let's get the normal map in. So what we need to do is add a file node. So I'm going to press tab, type in file, and we're looking for file texture. Pop that to the side. And we also need to pipe in the normal map into a normal map node. So press tab, type normal, and we want this one here, so AI normal map. So we're going to grab the color out of the file node and put that into input. And then the out value, we're going to put that into normal camera in the standard surface shader. Make that look smaller. Like that. Okay, so in the file node, let's grab our normal map. So I'm going to press this button here to find the normal map. And this one's going to be the one that we exported out from ZBrush as well. So find that. And we need to change the tiling mode to UDIM. You can see that Maya has found them all, which is great. And then we need to change the color space to raw because it's a utility map. And it should fix it up in here. Great. Now, one thing to note, if Maya is not picking this up, so the 4 tiles, it might mean that your naming convention is a little bit off. So if you didn't change it in ZBrush to UDIMs, by default, it will be this one here. So the one that's bracketed ZBrush. So you can try that or this. If not, then just manually rename each file to 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, and that should work. Great, so this looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. Now, if your normal map looks a little bit off, like this looks slightly off to me, it just means that you need to invert the Y value in the normal map node. So sometimes it can look way off than this. Like this looks pretty good. And for the most part, it looks great. But I think it looks a little bit off. And that just means that we need to invert the Y value. And you can see that updating down here. Great. So that looks much better to me. It looks more accurate to what it was in ZBrush. So with this setup here that we just made, it should look, or our model that's being rendered should look exactly like how it does inside ZBrush in terms of detail anyways. So you can see all the details that we're getting here. If you're a bit unsure, you can just navigate around and take a look at it. So let's move on to the subsurface scattering. So we're going to work on the skin shader here. So the first thing that we need is a file node. So press tab, type in file, and file texture. Great. And then let's go to image name and let's find the texture map. So this texture map is going to be the one that we just exported out from Substance Painter. And because this is a color map, we're going to leave the color space. But we do need to change the UV tiling mode to UDIM. You can see that Maya has found different tiles, which is good. So all we need to do is pipe that into the correct slot. So with this, what we're going to do is we're going to set this node structure up so you can do a little bit of look deving. So we're going to pipe this into a color correct node, and then we're going to pipe it into the correct slot in the standard surface. So over here, let's press tab and let's type in color correct. And we're looking for this one here. So you can pipe the color out into the color in. And this will allow us to make any changes to the hue, saturation value. We can crunch the whites and blacks here to get more contrast. And we can play around with quite a bit of things within this setting. And then we're going to pipe the out color into the subsurface color on the shader. Okay, so nothing has really changed, and that's because we need to go into the standard surface shader, find subsurface, and then change the weighting from 0 to 1. You should see quite a significant change here. Great, so that's looking pretty good. What we're going to do as well is let's just reduce the specular of this model as we're sort of working at the skin, because it's a bit too shiny. We haven't really done anything to it. It's sort of getting in the way. So in the specular section, let's increase the roughness all the way to 1. So we can just focus on the color for now. Great. So if I jump into the color correct, I can play around with all these values and I can show you how they work. So I can reduce the saturation and the model will become desaturated. I can push it above 1. So let's change this to, let's say, 1.1. You can see it's going to give a little bit of extra saturation in the render. So if you feel like you need to add a little bit more color to it, or you need to change the color, then you can just do it here in this color correct node. All right, so the next thing is we're going to work on the sort of the blood of this creature. So as the light scatters through the body, it's going to bounce around and then it's going to exit the body, right? And we need a sort of reddish, fleshy blood color for this to work nicely. And that's going to go into the subsurface radius. So what we're going to do is grab the color and use that as a starting point for the radius. Now, how the radius works is you have these values here in the RBG. So if I change it from HSV to RBG, you have the different layers of the skin associated with R, G, and B. So what you want to do is have the red color pretty high, because that's the blood that's going to come through, and then green and blue are the deeper values in the skin. So the dermis and lower dermal sort of layers of the skin. So you want them fairly low. What we're going to do is we're going to use the color as a starting point. So let's multiply the color map with a sort of darkish red color, and then we'll pipe that into the subsurface radius. So in an open space, just press tab and type in AI multiply. So it's this one here. So we're going to grab the color out and pipe that into input 1. And then what we can do is in the properties, we can select input 2. Again, change this from HSV to RBG. And then we're going to make this a sort of dark red. So anywhere from here should be fine. It's going to make my red a little bit darker. So somewhere around here, I think would work pretty well. You can see the preview there is like a darkish sort of red. So we can grab the out color and pipe that into the subsurface radius. And we should start to see a little bit come through. Okay. So I'm going to move this up a bit. And if we want to work with the subsurface a bit better, we can increase the quality. So he's looking a bit splotchy, and that's because the quality of this render is really low, so we can have it nice, fast, and snappy. But in order for us to really see the subsurface working, we need to increase the quality. So let's go to the render settings. Let's go to Arnold Renderer. Let's bump the AA to about 3. And the SS, let's bring that up to about 4. So the render times are going to increase, of course, but we're going to start to see how that works. And let's bring up the shader. So it's going to take a little while. So I'm at 30%. So I'm just going to pause the recording and I'll come back when it's done. All right, so that's done. You can see in the render, it looks more or less the same. There's not much going on. You can see a little bit of SS coming around here and maybe up here, but it's more or less the same. So let's look at the settings here. So in our properties of the standard surface, what we need to change to make the subsurface come through a bit more is the scale. So think of scale as like a multiplier of the subsurface. And the weighting of 1 and scale of 1 works really well for like a general human shape and size. But of course my creature's a lot bigger, he's a lot thicker, so we need to play around with this a bit more. The more lighter the skin as well, the more we're going to see some subsurface happening. But let's increase this. So I'm going to take a snapshot here. I'm going to open this up and take a snapshot of this so I can see what it was now, and then I'm going to render it out and take a look at the changes. So over here, I'm going to increase the scale to something fairly high just to see what it does and to see what the changes are going to be like. Okay, so let's bring this all the way up. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and I'll see you guys when this is done. Okay, so I'm back and I'm going to take another snapshot of this. Let's review the changes. So you can see a lot of that SS coming through on the face. So I can quickly toggle between the two. And you can see that this one has very minimal SS coming through. and this one has quite a bit. And you can see that it doesn't just only come through here and around here and on these little tips. It's over the whole body. So you can see that the body lights up. You can see that red blood sort of going back out or appearing on the surface. I really like this part here and here. And parts over here, not too much over here, but I do like it, kinda. But overall, it's just way too much. You even got some SS coming through over here on these sort of wrinkles on the back, which I don't really want. But I like how it's lit up the creature a bit more. I think it makes him look a bit more lively. And kind of fits with the background a bit as well with this SS going on. So let's try to find a middle ground here. So I'm going to bring this back, and I think let's change this to somewhere to be halfway. So I'm going to change this to 4. Press enter, and it's going to automatically redo the renderer for me. So I'm going to pause the video again, and I'll see you guys when this is done. Okay, so I'm back, and I'm going to take a snapshot of this renderer, or this render here, and just take a look at the 3 together. So this is the first one. This is very minimal SS going on. This is a lot, and this is somewhere in between. So I'm going to zoom up on the face. That's a lot, minimal, or mid, and this is minimal. Okay, so I'm happy with how this one looks. I like how there's a little bit of SS going on around here, a little bit over here, so you can see the differences there. And it's coming through the belly, which I liked on this one, but it's a bit too much. And this one's a bit dull, a bit lifeless. And this one has a little bit going there. And I like how there's some going on in this sort of thin skin area, which is nice. So I'm going to stick with this one here, which is set to 4. Now yours will be very different to mine. So you just got to pick something that works for you. In my case, I think 4 looks pretty good. Maybe 5 might be even better, but I'm going to stick with 4. Okay, so there are some areas here where I don't really want any subsurface coming through. Like around here, I'm not really keen on. And on the nose, I'm not really happy with. But I do like where it's happening everywhere else. There will be some SS coming through on the nails, right? You can sort of see it here, which we shouldn't have. So we need to put a black and white mask into the subsurface section here. You can just paint a black and white mask and pop that into this section. But what would happen if we did that is essentially what would happen is that we'll just delete parts of this mesh and it will just turn back to white. So that's the weighting here. If I drop this down, which I'm not going to do because it's going to take a while to render again, but if I drop this down, it's going to go all white. We're going to lose the texture. So what we need to do is we need to put in a base color as well. So this isn't going to do anything if I grab this color correct node and put it into the base color. It's going to more or less do the same thing, and it's going to look exactly the same pretty much. But if we add any sort of subsurface masking into this slot here, what would get masked will disappear, and underneath that mask will be the base color that comes through that has no subsurface applied to it. I hope that makes sense. But we do need to have a base color in here. So let's move on. I think this looks pretty good. We can come into the color correct. We can adjust the color of the subsurface, which is good. Now let's create the roughness map, so the specular. So in here, let's press tab and type in file and texture. Let's pop that to the side. And just like the with the color, let's add a color correct node as well. So this will allow us to look dev a little bit later. And we'll grab the color and put that into the color in. Pop that to the side like this. And we'll grab the color out. So we'll open up this color slot and we'll grab the out color red. And we'll pop that into specular. Like that. And then in the file node, let's find our roughness maps. Okay. Computer's slowing down a bit, so I'm going to pause the renderer. Hopefully it doesn't crash. Pause the video. I'm going to let this render through. Then I'm going to stop it and then find the roughness map. Okay, so I'm back. I'm going to pause this renderer. Pause this. And then I'm going to find the roughness map. And this is the one that we exported from Substance Painter. Okay, so make sure you change the UV tiling mode to UDIMs. And then because it's a utility map, we need to change that to raw. Great. So just so we can speed things up, I'm going to reduce the SS amount in the settings. So we're done with the SS. We know it looks good. So let's bring that down, and we're working with the specular now. So let's bring up the specular value to about 3. 3 should be fine. So we can have a bit more quality as we look at the specular levels. Now, before we press OK to the render, let's go to the standard surface, and then I think this should be fine actually. We can't change that. But the IOL level is the index of refraction. A lot of things that where light can sort of penetrate through, like water and sort of types of stones and things like that, has a sort of index of refraction. Water, which is what we want, at least that's what I want. I want it to kind of look and behave like water. So I'm going to change this to 1.35, which is the index refraction of water. So let's press render. Let's take a look at this. It probably wouldn't look much different, but let's render it out anyways. Okay, so that's too slow for my liking. In the render settings, I'm going to reduce the camera AA to about 1. And let's try that again. Okay, so that's a lot quicker. Let's see. So we're not seeing much of the roughness coming through, so we need to adjust this roughness slider. So let's wait for that to finish rendering. And let's reduce the roughness slider. So I'm just going to go halfway. So like 0.5-ish. See how that looks. Let that render and see how that sort of wetness on the surface looks. So think of like skin moisture or like sweat or something like that for your creature. If your creature is like aquatic, then you probably want to reduce the roughness even further. So just think of the type of skin that you want to go with. And this maybe might take a while. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll see you guys soon. Okay, I'm back. It didn't take that long. Okay, that looks pretty decent. I think the roughness is a bit low, so let's pause this. Let's increase the roughness to a little bit higher, and then let's press play again. Remember, the splotchiness is because we reduced the subsurface slider way down. Just kind of worried, or just worried about the roughness levels at this point. Okay, I kind of like that. It's a little bit hard to tell because the quality in general is quite low. So I'm going to stop this render and then let's just increase the quality maybe to 333. This is going to take a bit of time. So what I'm going to do is just pause the video and just render this out. I just want to see what it looks like when the quality is bumped up. So I'm going to press pause and I'll see you guys soon. Alright, so that only took a couple minutes. So you can see the roughness levels over here. And if it's a little bit hard to see on yours, then you might need to rotate the light so it's sort of hitting the creature at a different angle. But I like the roughness up here, and especially over here, I really like that. And I'm pretty happy with this render, to be honest. Kind of like it a lot. More so than my first one over here. Even though I thought this looked pretty good, it's too bright, and I think there's a lot we can do here in Photoshop. But I really like this one. That shot there looks really cool. That composition. So something like that. Eye down the middle of the screen. I think that's the shot there that I'm going to keep. So I'm really happy with how this is looking. Now, this setup for the skin is all you need to make it look the way that you want it. So this color correct will change the skin itself. The multiply here will change the subsurface color. So if you want that to be a different color or a bit brighter, if you're going for like an alien and he bleeds or it bleeds green, then you can change that to green. Then we have the roughness levels. If you want to crunch the numbers a bit, you can play around with this color gain and color offset, and that will contrast the colors quite a bit, making it a bit more sharper or wetter in some areas and drier in some. So that goes here, and then you got an overall specular value for the roughness here. So think of this as like a global roughness, and think of this as like crunching the numbers, so you can have some areas really rough and some areas really wet looking. This normal map you really don't want to change at all. Once you plug it in, it should just be left as is. Same with the displacement, just leave that as is. Any changes to this, you're going to deviate from the sculpture, and we don't want to do that. If you want to mess around with the light, you can go into the sky dome settings and you can increase the intensity of this light, and you can also rotate it as well. So if you don't like the way the light is hitting the model, you can literally just select it in the viewport and rotate it. Now with this one here as well, if you don't plan on using the background as a backdrop, you can come into the visibility and reduce the camera visibility all the way to 0. So you can see it's going to render this out. It's going to have the same render look. So it's going to use the lighting from the HDRI to light up your creature, but it's not going to have the background in. So you can composite that onto whatever you want, whatever background you want it to be. I kind of like the background, so I might keep it for this. Now, with all your other pieces, you're going to do more or less the same thing. You probably won't have as many things, so you can see that, you know, for some things, I don't know what this is. That's the eyeball. It's just one thing going into the base color. And what's this one? This one is the tusk. So there's not as much going on here. There's no subsurface scattering or anything like that going on. And this one's for the eye bits. So there's not much going on here as well. I didn't bother with the displacement map for these things because you probably won't see it anyways. Now, don't forget you can add a black and white mask. Black meaning that we don't want it, white meaning that we do, to the subsurface, and that will go into this section here. So you just need to create a file node and pipe that into here. That should get rid of any areas where you don't want any subsurface to appear. Now with the eyes, there's a couple of things that we can do. I'm going to stop this renderer and come back into this view. So I have my eyes here. I don't know why my guy's green, but if anyone knows, you can let me know. If I want to do that, no. Okay, I think it was just thinking. I'm going to ungroup this and just work with the eyes. So with the eyes, it's going to have two levels here. So just going to see why it's lagging. Okay, so we've got two levels. We're going to have the eyeball, which is on this model, and then we're going to have the glossy part for the eyes, so the wet look. With this particular model, how I textured it was pretty rough, so this is pretty much nothing, so I'm just going to delete that and just copy that across. So delete, and now we just have one eye. Okay, I'm slowing down quite a bit, so I just want to see what's actually going on. It's not rendering, so must just be my computer. So I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to go to edit and duplicate. So we're going to have two. So we're going to have eyes, and then we're going to have the outer bit for it. So with this, I'm just going to scale this up, and let's see if I remember how to change the pivot point. I'm sure there's a better way to do this pivot point thing. Oh. I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay, so that's more or less in the center. You just basically want to get this pivot in the center because we want to scale this up just slightly, right? Only a little bit. So what we can do now is we can go back into the hypershade and making sure that we have the outer selected. Let's go back into hypershade, and then we're going to apply a standard surface shader, so AI standard. And this will be the outer eye. So let's apply this to that. And all we're going to do here in the standard surface, I'm going to rename this to eye out, is reduce the any sort of roughness. We'll bring that all the way down, and the IOL levels, we want that to be 1.35, and then we're going to add a coat to this. So let's increase the weighting for the coat, and let's reduce the roughness to 0, 1.35 for the IOL level. Uh-oh. This one, yeah. So 1.35 for the IOL level, and transmission up here, increase this all the way to 100 or 1. So what this would do is create a nice glossy look for us for the eye. So we have the eyeball underneath, and then right over the top of it we have this ball here that's going to give us this really nice glossy wet look to the eyeball. So I'm going to pause this and I'll come back when it's done. Alright, so I'm back, and that's the final look. There's not much change. So see, it's slight gloss change. It's kind of better in different lighting, and if you want, you can change the transmission a little bit, so have a little bit of weighting in there so you can see it a little bit more. And this is important, which I didn't. No, this is the one that we want. So a little bit of weighting, less weighting in here. You can increase the depth as well if you wanted to, or just play around these settings. And that's pretty much it, right? So all of these settings you can play around with to get the look that you're going for. That should set you up for a nice solid render. When you're done, you can increase these numbers. I wouldn't max this out like this here, going 555 for each, and like 5 or 6 for the camera AA. Like that is really high. That will take a long time to render. So bumping these numbers up really high, even 1 or 2 points, is a really big change. So just have fun. In this stage, you should be experimenting a lot with the different camera angles, different HDRIs, different color correction, look deving sort of stuff to get the look that you're going for. And I'll see you guys in the next one.